I've got a couple questions, but the one that keeps coming to mind that is kind of adjacent to the sexual violence piece specifically, is the idea of reverse racism. And so a lot of times when I'm having these conversations with other white people, the idea of reverse racism comes up, and they give examples about times that they have felt discriminated against, specifically when you're talking about affirmative action or, you know, something along those lines. And so I'm wondering if you, Jenna, or anyone else has some thoughts on that and how to have those conversations and explain it in a way that isn't attacking the other person, but is trying to educate them.
I have some thoughts, but I also have been dominating this conversation. So if anyone else wants to answer, please do.
We asked you to dominate this conversation, so have at it.
Okay. So I'm just like thinking back to a very specific class and like having to really talk about this. This was the crux of the class. I spent 11 sessions with this one class, a sophomore class in high school. And so much of it surrounded this conversation that's kept coming up over and over again around reverse racism. Eventually what I came to is what we've been taught is the definition of racism. If you look it up in Merriam-Webster, which by the way, I don't know if you heard, but they're changing the definition of racism in Merriam-Webster's dictionary. Party. Yeah. Okay, it'll say like, it is discrimination based on a racial identity. That's not what I'm talking about when I talk about racism. When I talk about racism, I'm talking about systemic racism, or systemic, like, you know, it's not just about one person hurting another person based on that. Like as someone who looks the way I do, I could walk down the street and they could be like, look, it's a white person, let's punch her in the face. And like, that would be a crime. That would be a crime against me. Is that something that probably happens to me often? No. Do people follow me around a store often because they think I'm going to steal something because of the color of my skin? No. So when we talk about racism, we need to be clear that what we're talking about is not individual instances that have to do with it. That can happen, not okay. Would that ever be okay if someone punched me in the street for no reason because of the color of my skin? No, never. So starting on that page, and what we're here to talk about today is people who regularly, every single day, they get these experiences, these microaggressions. There's this one video that talks about them like little mosquito bites every day, plus the bigger like things that happen to them, the microaggressions on top of the big aggressions of racism that you have to endure. And I think one of the biggest things to couch this in is the context of history and looking at history. And there's like a really great icon that shows like slavery, Jim Crow segregation, redlining, all of the policies against people of color, and that's against Black people, but against like the Japanese internment camps, right? Termination for the tribes, all of these policies that are enacted in US history. And then really like looking at like women and the right to vote. White women got the right to vote on one day, but when did women of color get the right to vote? When did Native women get the right to vote? When did Black women get the right to vote? And where are we starting out? What is this nation based on? It is based on a foundation of racism, sexism, right? Slavery was legal. Who got to vote? Rich, white, landowning men. So we need to understand that our history is starting in a very specific place and couch when we talk about racism in that history and not individual instances, because they're not individual instances. They are instances that just add up over and over and over again. And if we refuse to see these patterns, it's because of our privilege and it's because of us wanting to hold on to that power. Another thing is to go back to like what I was saying before about it doesn't mean you don't suffer in life. You know, if I'm talking to like a 14-year-old white boy who's like, you know, just got his little heart broken because he got broken up with, or like got a bad grade on his test, and like, you know, he's in his teenage hormones and he's just like so depressed, and he's like, do you know how much pain I'm in? Do you understand this? I feel pain too. You're like, I get it. No, you can absolutely feel pain. Everybody of any identity can feel pain. What we're saying here is that your pain isn't associated to your race. And other people are experiencing pain because of these identities. And those are things that are handed down to them from generation to generation. And so your pain is real, and that's valid. I'm not trying to invalidate your experience, but we're trying to also talk about something different.